talk about the HVUT electronic verification project. And Jay said no introduction necessary. I think we'll see if that's the case.
Thank you, Peter. Everybody got their coffee and their chocolate this afternoon so we can try to stay alert for a couple more hours, maybe not even that, but I assure you mine will not take a couple hours. So, I'll give you, I can make it real short if you want to. Text your questions, please. Everybody should know the number by now. So, for those that are newbies, I'll go through a quick history of the Federal Heavy Vehicle Use Tax. That's the U.S. Code section that provides for it. As long as I've been around, there's been discussions about better ways to do it, cooperative agreements with the IRS, working with the Federal Highway Administration, going to OCR recognition on the 2290 forms, and they've all led to absolutely nothing. So we're all required to do it by our own laws, so we're all stuck with it. But as you know, a couple years ago the IRS said, okay, you can do it electronically, and they allowed some service providers to come in and do it electronically. So Alabama, a couple years ago, I think Ohio was on the call too. You know, we got on a call and with the IRS and several other service providers to find out what it would take to become a service provider. And we both said, no, thank you. And many of you are already acting on the IRS's behalf and accepting the 2290 forms and the payment and then batching them up and sending them to the IRS. We refuse to do that in Alabama because we don't want to take responsibility for that information, because you had to sign an agreement with the IRS and we just did not feel comfortable doing that. So this is basically where we are. We don't have many choices. You either choose to do it on behalf of the IRS, or you do it the old-fashioned way that I guess has been done now for probably more than 30 years. Is that right? Pretty much right, Ken? Tim? All right, so what we propose to do is to create a simple web service that anybody can use and develop pretty quickly. And it would be, you know, a uniform type service that all the service providers would have, and anybody that wanted to use the service would have. The request would include very basic information. During the pilot, we said, you know, it's going to include the VIN, obviously, the EIN, the tax year, and the vehicle weight. So right now, Casey, there are what, 22 dozen maybe service providers?
Yeah, about 25.
25. So without knowing which service provider actually accepted the electronic filing, it's probably going to have to be some sort of blanket or shotgun approach on the web service. So you're broadcasting, state is broadcasting, or the vendor that does your registrations is broadcasting to these service providers, and they respond with either a confirmed or an unconfirmed response. And if it's unconfirmed, maybe they even respond with an error code. So these are the service providers that we got off the IRS website. And 2290 Tax was our pilot, and that's who we did the test with. Thank you very much, Casey. So before we started all this, we tried to see if we could actually get some information from the IRS and Federal Highway. Yes. That's what I said too. So the main IRS office, even our contact that we have, Joe Mazuka, he was really no help. Not because he didn't want to be, because he did not have the authority to give approval to go ahead with this. So all we did is we talked to our local FTI guy, and since Alabama DMV is part of the Department of Revenue, and we do income tax and things like that, so they're pretty well familiar with IRS FTI requirements. So basically what he said is that you don't have to process IRS safeguards because information never goes to the IRS. It's between the jurisdiction and the service provider. Just like the data for your income tax return when you use TurboTax, Tax Act, TaxSlayer, any one of those other IRS service providers that are certified IRS service providers, when they pass that information directly to the states. So it works exactly the same way. There's not much information that's being passed to the web services. There's not a whole lot of information to protect. You know, of course, the service provider is going to safeguard their information. The jurisdiction is going to safeguard their information, what little information there is. Of course, the service itself is encrypted. Are there any questions so far? Yes, Chester.
So they issued, the Office of Safeguards issued a formal opinion that Pub 1075 is not going to come into play.
We will never, I should say that.
Well,
We will probably not get anything out of the IRS regarding this officially. I'm just going to go on a limb there and say it's not going to happen. This was our Alabama representative working through our FTI expert with our department.
right.
Said, hey, in my opinion, because this works exactly like income tax information, it's not FTI because the IRS didn't get its hands on it first.
Right, it's not their, yeah, it's just usually Safeguards is they'll usually at least give you an email confirmation, although the only challenge there there's been a lot of transition through that office, so the answers perhaps aren't always consistent.
I'm gonna get to that in a second. What questions?
I hear Jay.
Marcy from New York IRP. We just had an HVUT audit and they came in and reviewed about 300 of our records and our paperwork, and they required to see the 2290 stamped form on every one of our records. How is this going to pass if you're not even really contacting them?
Yeah, let me get to this next slide and I'll tell.
Jay.
Jay, can I add in too? I've been bugging IRS from my end about this for a long time too, and the consistent answer I get is that the 2290 is just too small. They can't get budget for it. So I've been trying to get them to go to committee for a long time and get me information about proper consent, and they don't have time to send it to committee. So this is still a really small thing for them, which is a good thing for us to kind of keep in mind as we go forward.
Anybody else have something to say or comments about the IRS? Nobody from the IRS is here, right? Is it being recorded? Yeah, but I mean, quite frankly and honestly, I don't think the IRS really cares because it's not their data. The data is being passed between the state and the service provider. It's not considered FTI, so they don't really care. And if it's all being filed electronically, then it's being done in a way that they have already approved and certified through an approved service provider. So there's really nothing new there. Now, question about the Federal Highway Audit. We too have gone through a Federal Highway Administration 2290 audit, and we too have been required to provide all of the paper documents. How many of us have auditors that want paper documents? Me being a former auditor, that's the way I am too. I want to touch it, I want to feel it, I want to be able to look at it. But the theme of this whole meeting is that we have to move past those paper documents. So again, I tried to get some sort of confirmation from our local federal highway people. I tried to get some sort of confirmation from the FHWA people at headquarters. They're not going to give you anything. I mean, I've talked to their legal staff. It's very, very low on their items to look at. So again, the next time we're audited and they want to see something, I will give them a list of all the records, the logs, everything that we have validated electronically. And if they like, I can probably recreate a 2290 with a watermark on it, if that's what they really want. So there are ways around it. But we would welcome any other jurisdiction that wants to go in with us, just to try it out. That's up to you. Thank you. All right, questions? I saw some over here.
I have a question. You mentioned something about requesting a PDF from the service provider. Is that request through the web service also?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have discussed that, and the web service will actually allow a PDF. So
PDF document.
if you want to store a bunch of PDFs, and that works for you, that's fine. Personally, but I don't want a PDF. Electronic record is all I want.
So, first of all, great idea, and thanks for being the first jurisdiction to attempt it. If you need any kind of help or participation, we'll be glad to also participate. So when do you plan to work? Is there a timeline, or is it just a proposal at this time?
Yeah, I'm going to get to that. Scott?
Jay, I may have missed it. Have you received any kind of feedback from FHWA about if they do an audit and you've utilized this system, whether or not they would?
No, in our last audit, I asked for feedback.
Yeah.
In fact, when they gave me the report, my rebuttal to the report included questions about what if I did it this way? Nothing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So very frustrating, but what's new?
Yeah, right.
30 years now, we've been frustrated. So time marches on. It's time to try something different. Otherwise, nothing will ever change.
Jay? do you-
Yes.
Over here.
Sorry.
Other side. There we go.
I didn't see your hand.
Do you anticipate any administrative cost? What's the ask for the service providers to cooperate with this? I mean, what?
Well, I'll get to that plan in a minute. I'm sorry. These are really good questions. But let me get to the taxpayer consent first, which is, the third part of making sure all this is above board. The service providers, in order to participate, or for their customers to be able to participate, have to get consent from their customers. And I think many of them already have a consent agreement language or a box that they have to check that allows the service provider to share that information with their base jurisdiction. So this is really nothing new, but it will have to be, consent will have to be provided in order for the service provider to share that information. Now, what carrier would not give consent? There could be some out there, but all right, so I don't really have to go through the benefits, but, of course, no paper. I think it's going to promote compliance by encouraging e-filing, and will definitely improve the registration process. Because right now, at least in Alabama, that is really the only piece of paper other than a lease agreement that we're looking at renewal. Risk, obviously, data security, which are minimal, because there's really not that much data that's being passed. As I mentioned, if the Federal Highway Administration doesn't like it, or the IRS doesn't like it, again, I don't think the IRS will really care. Federal Highway Administration will probably only care because they won't have a piece of paper to look at when they do an audit. Now, here we get to the participation and timeline and things like that. So, this is all just proposed, and none of it has actually been done yet because we're still in the pilot phase. So a memorandum of agreement between the state and the service provider, which I have a sample MOA. If anybody wants it, if anybody wants to add anything, take it away from it. As I mentioned, taxpayer consent, and of course, an internet connection that can support a web service. Of course, should be assigned a user ID and password. All right, there's really no timeline on this. In fact, we have just recently done some testing, and these are the results of the test, which I'll go over in a second. But the plan is to get more service providers to participate, and Casey has agreed to work with the industry to get the service providers on board. And what I have agreed to do is to try to get some other jurisdictions on board. That's the initial plan. Now, long-range plan, what I'd like to see, and I've already talked to IRP about this a little bit. They haven't agreed to it, of course, so I hate to throw them under the bus, but I certainly will. It is for IRP to maintain support for the web service. In other words, post it on the IRP server and let everyone, both the IRP registration offices as well as your county registration offices who verify the collection of the 2290 and the tax, use the web service that's hosted by IRP. That, and from my perspective, that seems like probably the most centralized association, agency, organization that could handle this. Either that or AMBER. All right, so the test data. So between 2290 tax and Alabama, there were just over 2,000 qualifying records. The good news is that we were able to match about 80% of the VIN numbers. The bad news is we could not match on the EIN, and we had some problems with weight. The EIN problem, or I shouldn't say problem, the inability to match the EIN is probably due to the fact that you have owner-operators that are paying the tax in their name and their EIN. However, they're leasing on to a carrier, and the carrier is registering the vehicle. So the big question that we have to answer is, do we really need the EIN to verify? We'll collect it, but do we need it to verify? It kind of goes back to the way that the 2290 used to be verified. We didn't really care who paid it, just that it was paid. And that is contrary to what the IRS has said recently about the tax has to be paid in the owner's name or the registrant's name, depending on what IRS office or official you talk to. It can't be paid in the DBA name, so name is obviously not important anymore, but this EIN is going to cause a lot of problems unless we can figure out what to do with it. I think John had a question first.
I'll have Mike.
Well, whoever's got the mic then, go ahead.
Here, I'll trump you for just a second. During our FHWA audit a couple of years ago, I actually asked the question, who is the taxpayer? What's the definition of the taxpayer? They forwarded me over to the IRS to get that definition. IRS couldn't tell me a definition for the taxpayer. So my takeaway from that was, if I can find a hit on the VIN, I don't really care whose name the 2290 is in, as long as it's current and for the right weight category.
Jerry, we've been in the same boat with you. We cannot get an answer from them. We've been back and forth on trying to comply with what we think they want. I think Joe Mazuka's probably said the thing that made the most sense. Just make sure that the tax is paid on the vehicle. Because we get so worried about, because of the IRS publication saying the tax has to be paid by the owner. Well, who is the owner? They couldn't tell me if the owner was the true owner of the vehicle, the operator of the vehicle, the registrant of the vehicle. John.
The EIN is important because I've had some owner-operators come back to me, okay, and indicate the IRS, okay, is after them for the heavy vehicle use tax because of the type of taxes they're filing. So we had to provide them proof, okay, that the vehicle was paid, okay? If we had filed it, he should have filed it correctly under his name, under his EIN number, and he wouldn't have had that problem. But your point about the payment fact, okay, I understand what you're saying, but the problem is, he doesn't have proof. The IRS is saying, hey, in order to validate the fact that it was paid under that vehicle, you need to provide me proof.
Well, won't he have proof?
No, the company just charged them back. They didn't give them their computer information that was received from the IRS, okay, to segregate that particular unit out. I can give it to them because I have the 326 pages, okay, that the guy stamped, but I had to find the vehicle in the system, okay, in order to give him the qualification that we paid it for.
Well, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I hate to seem very hard about this, but from a registration perspective, I really only care about one thing.
And I understand that, okay. Where is the, Schneider had the same problem and now files all of their 2290s. They make sure that all their contracts file their own 2290s. And they have a big number of them.
Yeah, Casey.
I'll just tack on to that Joe Mazuka at IRS is aware of that problem and looking for a way to improve the wording of the legislation so that either that driver who paid for the 2290 is legally allowed to take it with them when they go to another fleet, or to find another solution, because what's happening right now is the drivers are paying for more than 12 months of tax in a year when they move from fleet A to job B. And then to speak to your question, Jerry, about who's responsible to file and pay the tax, I have that information, and I'd be very happy to give you the LexisNexis legal code and everything else that goes along with it, or to talk to you offline, because it took me about 3 years to nail that down, but I do have that information.
Okay. I was just going to add that as one of the states that does accept the filings and forward them to the IRS, we strongly encourage our owner-operators to file in their own name and not under the name of the company that they're running for, so that they don't have that issue. And at least we can kind of control it because we're taking the majority of the filings.
Yeah.
No other questions? Well, all right, so these are the codes, the error codes that we've kind of come up with just in the pilot. And out of those over 2,000 records, we couldn't match 77 of them. And that may be due to, older records or whatever. Some of the bins were, maybe a character or two off, but, we were employing some fuzzy matching to try to make sure that they match, if they had an O instead of a 0. But this is where we would encourage the service providers to have some sort of bin matching program, if they don't already, to ensure that they at least accept a valid VIN number. As I mentioned, we had some problems with matching the EINs for the reasons that we already talked about. But interestingly, we had some problems with weight, which is very interesting, because they're paying their tax based on the weight. So they're reporting one weight to the service provider, but they're reporting another weight to us. So apparently there's a discrepancy in the taxes they're paying on the weight that they have declared. So we came up with some what ifs to do if there were errors. Obviously, you know, a wrong VIN, the carrier can go back through the service provider and amend. Not a problem, you don't have to re-verify. When it's a wrong EIN, just like they do with paper, they're gonna have to go to the IRS office and refile. If it's the wrong tax year, obviously they have to refile. With weights, they could actually do an amendment in some cases, that with their service provider, and then we could re-verify. And all that would happen as fast as the web service would allow it. Casey also suggested that the jurisdictions need to know what service provider they're actually dealing with, because if you remember, if I said we're just shotgun approach, we're just sending a blanket message out there to have X number of service providers, and then one is responding saying, yeah, I have that VIN. So we need some sort of identifier, whether it's the service provider's EIN or some other specific ID number that we can use to validate, you know, it's the service provider, and we can tell that registrant that, yeah, you're gonna need to talk to your service provider who is, in order to correct the problem. As I said, it's pretty simple. And as I've said, we need to really make a decision about what we need to do about the EIN. I mean, we're going to continue to test. But the web service is finished, it's working, and we'll continue to host it. Other jurisdictions that want to participate will have to host it as well, so they'll have their own service that they're hosting until, and hopefully, when IRP takes it over, and then they can host it. So, any more questions?
I always have questions. I was an annoying child.
Go ahead, Gary, since you have the mic.
So, so Jay, how does this connect to your registration system? Flag the registration somehow?
That's my question.
Yeah, how does it connect to the, everybody heard that? How do we connect? Well, obviously, we have a VIN number, and the VIN number is the primary identifying number that we use to connect the registration to the service provider's record.
And you're doing this both for IRP and non-IRP vehicles?
That's the plan. Right now, we're just doing it for IRP vehicles.
And then are you flagging it somehow in your system? To say,
Yeah,
like, solid
we have a
one?
log. We have a log of all the requests and of course the responses.
Okay.
And that's what I would plan to provide to Federal Highway if they
Right.
wanted my information, is here's my log. Oh, we want paper. Okay, let me generate paper for you. Just tell me which one you want paper for, and I'll generate some paper for you.
And you've already written that log piece.
Yeah,
Yeah.
any web service schema, and I'm not a techie guy, even though I might throw some words around that I don't really understand, that you can have a log of all the transactions that go through the service. It identifies like who the service provider is, the vehicle information, the weight, and the response, the date, the time, things like that. So you'd have a log of the entire transaction. But you could put as we talked about when I was on the board, when we were talking about having this separate registration database instead of the IRP clearinghouse, where jurisdictions could upload their data nightly if they wanted to, real time if they wanted to, weekly, and then we could actually have a reporting module that you could run reports off of that instead of running them off the clearinghouse, which is, is older data, and plus it takes a long time and it bogs down the clearinghouse when you do that. But the talk was that we'd have a little indicator that would, just a checkbox, 2290 paid, yes or no. But you could do the same thing with your system. I mean, presumably you already have a system where you can verify documents and you can check them off when received, either electronically or manually. I know we do. There was one more question. Dennis, did you have a... No, I'm good. Okay. We done? All right, thank you very much.